like this may be a really good video.
Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Mondays, where we talk about advocacy, resources, and ending the stigmatization associated with mental health. I'm sure you have that intro memorized by now, because I sure do. Today we are going to talk about complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very different, but also similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. As always, if you do feel like this is something that fits you, please talk to your mental health care professional. We always want to make sure that you're talking to the professionals and not to self-diagnose. Let's get into it. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is essentially dealing with trauma over a very long period of time. Post-traumatic stress disorder is one specific traumatic experience, and complex, what makes the PTSD complex, is going through a trauma over a very long period of time to the point where your brain has to adapt to that specific trauma. So that's what makes it complex. A lot of people who experience CPTSD, though it's not always, a lot of them experience it in childhood. But any type of traumatic event over a long window of time can make you develop complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So, let me just put these behind my ear because they're annoying me. So it was really difficult for me to stumble upon this diagnosis and for it to actually be given to me. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is sometimes difficult to diagnose because it is not in the DSM-5. It is technically a subset of PTSD, and it is a stress disorder otherwise not specified. Therefore, the diagnosis for CPTSD can be a little bit more difficult than PTSD. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder develops after a very long period of time of experiencing trauma. This can happen if you experience childhood trauma, if you are in a really long abusive relationship. Things like that can develop into complex PTSD. Not always, and that's the fun thing about PTSD and complex PTSD. Sometimes you feel the effects from it, and sometimes you don't. The thing about complex post-traumatic stress disorder is that if you experience trauma over a long period of time, you may feel the effects of complex PTSD, but not everyone does. Some are more genetically predisposed to experiencing, the effects of it, but it doesn't always happen. Some people can experience a trauma over a long period of time and come out of it on the other end perfectly okay. It really just depends, and it's kind of a jackpot type situation. I got the jackpot of experiencing childhood trauma and coming out of it with CPTSD. CPTSD manifests really differently than post-traumatic stress disorder, and that we will get into next time on our Mental Health Monday. And if you are curious about statistics on CPTSD, because it is a relatively new disorder and not a lot of people really know about it, I would suggest going and doing your own research and figuring that out for yourself, because I personally didn't feel comfortable talking about statistics that I didn't know were super accurate. As always, we want to ensure that you do not self-diagnose yourself. Talk to a mental health care professional, see what they have to say, because they know a lot more than I do, even though it's my own diagnosis. The professionals know best. And make sure if you do want to get a diagnosis and you're curious about it, that you do get somebody that is trauma informed. If you've experienced childhood trauma and you're curious about, maybe this is something I might have, make sure that your therapist is trauma informed. And you can always ask them. It is okay to advocate for yourself and ask your potential therapist, hey, are you trauma informed? What is your experience with trauma, PTSD, and CPTSD? It's all about your own personal journey, and make sure that you advocate for yourself and do what's best for you. So in conclusion, CPTSD happens after a long period of dealing with trauma, whereas PTSD happens after a traumatic event. Those are the real differences between PTSD and CPTSD, and next Mental Health Monday, we will get into the real differences of both. As always, make sure you talk to your mental health care professional, check yourself, and make sure that you are taking care of yourself, your diagnosis, and thanks for tuning in with us. Have a great Monday!